Southern California Horticulture Society. And our speaker tonight is Johanna Silver. She is a James Beard Award-winning writer and also was the editor of Sunset magazine for many years. She is going to talk to us tonight about her new book that's out, Growing Weed in the Garden, a no-fuss seed to stash guide to outdoor cannabis cultivation. There it is. And we actually, if you can stick around, we will be doing a door prize. So people who are here will have a chance to win a copy of Joanna's book. We'll be doing that after her presentation. I think that is pretty much where we're at right now. So again, if you have any questions for Joanna, you can use the chat function or the Q&A session, and we will be doing answering questions after her presentation. So I'm gonna mute myself and introduce, thank you very much, Joanna, for joining us. And I'll let you go ahead with your presentation.
It's my pleasure to be here. And I was wondering why Carol Bornstein's name sounded so familiar and realized that her book, one of her books, Reimagining the California Lawn, has been one of my Bibles for a long time. So I am delighted to be here. Okay, I'm gonna get going. And we're gonna hope that a 4-year-old doesn't come barreling in here to say goodnight. He is under strict instructions not to, but you never know. I just had to mention that. So hello, everybody. I wish we could be in person together, but alas, here we are. Thank you for having me. I'm here to talk about my second book, Growing Weed in the Garden. And so just a little bit about where I come from, because I feel like my approach and my journey in is part of the story. So as was mentioned, I come from the world of Sunset magazine, was there for 10 years, started with a shovel in my hands in the test garden and ended as the garden editor before, well, anyway, we'll get there. So did super cool things, none of them having anything to do with cannabis whatsoever. I flew to Alaska to cover this sort of boom in peony farming. And this is down closer to your neck of the woods, outside of Fallbrook, to meet protea growers. And I think I just have a thing for flowers in general. And then in the years are starting to go by. At the end of 2017, Sunset was bought by private equity, and most of us lost our jobs and I didn't know what to do from there, but I knew I wanted to keep writing. And I got tasked by an outcrop of the San Francisco Chronicle to grow weed in my backyard and document it as a gardener. And I did, at the time, it was right on the cusp of recreational use and cultivation going into effect in 2018 in California. And I had no idea where to get seeds, what to do. I knew nothing about the plant. So I worked on a 10-part series for them. And you can find most of them online, and it's more me bumbling my way through how much I don't know. And what became very apparent very quickly to me was that there was a lack of garden-oriented resources about how to grow this plant. Everything out there is written, is my next slide books? Yeah, is written for indoor cultivation. And they read more like electrician handbooks and very foreign to a gardener. There's nothing garden-y feeling about it. And any nod to outdoors is about the clandestine nature of it, how to wear duct tape on your shoes to hide your tracks, and what fence is, how high the fence needs to be. And I'm not knocking that, because I think that there were people, we have the genetic seed bank that we do because of people who were growing during this time. But the information doesn't translate to somebody, maybe one of you in this audience, who just wants to grow. These are 3 books that I use, that I like. The only one that's really outdoors is Feminist Weed Farmer, but there were no pictures and just still kind of a lot missing. So This is actually my second book. My first one was The Bold Dry Garden, about the Ruth Bancroft Garden. So with one book under my belt and a fire under my butt to keep writing, I pitched this next book. And I have to tell you that after working at Sunset for 10 years and eventually taking the helm of the department and thinking achieving what was my dream job, I thought surely I had peaked. That would be the peak, the pinnacle of my career. And I will tell you that I have never had as much fun in my entire life as I did learning about weed and writing this book. And the editor of my last book told me that you can always tell if somebody's had fun when they're writing a book. And I would like to say that I think you can tell that I've had a lot of fun writing this book. So that is my approach. It is a tough love approach, which I have to explain to non-gardeners, but I know in this room or in all of your living rooms, I'm in good company of telling you, not needing to go on and on and on about why I don't baby my plants. I'm not interested. I give them as little as possible. I try and get them in the right setting, right light conditions, right amount of water, compost, and I let them go. I'm not interested in these very complicated fertilizing schedules that people have in the weed world. There's a lot of myths and misinformation and strange cultivation practices in the weed world. And I thought that meant that weed was this very complicated thing to grow. And indeed, it just comes from having been illegal to grow and not being able to talk freely about cultivation, trying to maximize for various things so that you could sell it, and of course, from having been grown indoors. So these are just two pretty pictures of weed. And I wanted to just discuss quickly a few things about lingo, because that is a place where there's a lot of information. So you'll notice I say weed freely. I don't know, weed is like, it just sounds right. I say cannabis, pot, you can say all of these things. I would steer clear of marijuana, which has racist underpinnings when it came into fashion as weed was being villainized, dealing with people bringing it across our southern border. So though I said it in high school, I don't really say marijuana anymore. And I would say a lot of people have phased that out. So you might consider doing that. And there's a lot of people in the industry to make it sound fancy, refer to it as cannabis, but find a word that works for you. You'll notice that I don't say strain at all. And that's because what other plant are we talking about its strain? None. So I say cultivar like a good little girl in my book, cultivar, every time, even though we all sort of colloquially, I hope all of you do too, misuse variety. But cultivar would be the proper term for when we're talking about these, cultivated varieties of cannabis. I am not the person to go to find out what cultivar to grow to do what for you. That is not my wheelhouse, not my lane. I think it's entirely subjective. And I say that very outright in the book. And something else I wanted to, a few other things. So one of the things that for me, I had to wrap my head around was this idea of hemp, because hemp is getting thrown around a lot now. And it was like, what is hemp? And so I wanted to just clarify for any of you that historically, hemp referred to cultivars of cannabis that were bred specifically for fiber. They were bred for long fibers, not for resinous flowers. And today, hemp has a new legal definition, which is that anything with less than 0.3% THC by weight is considered hemp. So you can have plants that are being bred for sticky resinous flowers that are called hemp because the cannabinoid makeup has, let's say, a lot of CBD in it and not THC. So if you've been confused about why suddenly we're hearing about hemp and it's not always fiber, that's why. I forgot to tell you why I originally fell in love with the plant. So yeah, I knew nothing about this plant. I smoked a lot of it in high school, so much so that I don't think I included it in this presentation, but the book is dedicated to high school me with my hemp necklace and my eyes that needed Visine. So like that was super cool. Suddenly I'm, my life is all making sense again. I'm not a big consumer now, but as a plant person who loves horticulture, I fell in love quickly. So for one of the things, I think I had it on the intro slide, it is one of the oldest plants under human cultivation. So up there with flax and barley and peas and these very, very old plants that we could get a lot of use of. Cannabis is right up there. We used it for seed and for oil and fiber and, sacrament, smoking, medicine, religion, whatever. And so it's very, very old. There are some people who believe that it is the plant that domesticated us, that got us settled and starting to breed. So I think that's really interesting. As such, it's never gone through a modern day breeding program like every other, plant that we get our hands on that's been studied by universities for disease resistance and increased yield and things that might make it friendlier to farmers or for home gardeners. That has never happened. And the genetics are a mess because of it, because nobody kept records of what they were growing, because that just adds to your prison sentence. It is happening now, but it's almost being done more by private companies and not by universities, slowly partnering with universities as legalization ramps up. So it feels like the Wild West. And then immediately I learned that the plant is dioecious, so separate male and female plants, which is rare and rarer yet in an edible plant. And though I smoked weed full of seeds in high school and it totally did the job, somewhere in the 1970s, Sensimilla, this idea of female only, unpollinated female flowers, no seeds in your weed, became hugely popular. And it is now a big faux pas to have seeds in your weed. So to have this dioecious crop that you have to learn to tell the difference between the male and female plants and then cull the males was just fascinating. I'm totally in. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about names. The only other thing is indica and sativa. I don't know how familiar you all are with these terms. Oh no, so taxonomically, there is still some disagreement on cannabis. Cannabis sativa, subspecies indica, there's different models, but genetically, the results are in and it is all cannabis sativa. So though you may have heard of cannabis and sativa as being these different plants, they're not. Historically, they refer to cannabis that was brought to and bred in different environments and was impacted. It evolved under both the climatic conditions of that area, along with what was being selected for by those populations. So historically, indica comes from cold places where plants grow short and squat, and they have to ripen before winter, high elevation, cold places. Super sticky resinous plants that finish early. And sativas were more these long equatorial plants, brought to other places that grew long and, barely finish by November, December. It's an annual. In case you don't know, hot season, summer annual. So if you've ever seen pictures of insane, I call them weed trees, that was indeed grown in one season. A hard frost kills it. And I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to tell you about that. Oh, so now because genetics are so mixed up, though someone can tell you, oh, this is a sativa, this is an indica, you can rest assured that unless you're running in some really elite circles of cannabis collectors, which I wouldn't put it past the people in this room, you can almost guarantee that you're getting a hybrid of these two types of plants. And it's really nebulous when it comes to their impact on your psyche. So also historically, indicas are thought to be calming for some, and indica couch is what is said, and sativas are these cerebral uplifting cultivars. Again, anything you're getting is a hybrid. These percentages at a dispensary are totally made up, and it's really subjective. For example, I only dance and clean on pot, period. Doesn't matter if it's marked for sleep. So in the book I go through the parts of the plant. I mean, it's a really cool looking plant. The flowers it's in the same family as hops, and the flowers are just incredibly unique. You have these totally badass cannabis leaves growing in your garden. And there are two ways to grow, although this is actually changing a little bit since the time I wrote this book. We'll have to do another edition. So you can start from seed, which I wholeheartedly recommend. I see someone connecting to audio, but I'm just going to ignore it. You can start from seed. You can get seeds legally at a dispensary. You can get seeds sold as souvenirs, wink, wink, online from seed banks. These are notoriously not traceable, reliable, what they say they are. So if you are going the seed route, I would buy from a dispensary that carries brands that they can tell you about. Similar to how we've all gotten better, let's say, asking about where some of our food comes from. You want to start asking some of these same questions about the farmers growing your seeds. I love this company, Humboldt Seed Company. The founder, Nat Pennington, is a marine biologist by trade, so he does genetics and gets that breeding is indeed a full-time job. Cannabis seeds have not been bred for stability. That's part of this modern day breeding, lack of modern day breeding. And so Humboldt seeds I have found to be stable and amazing, and largely more and more descriptions being written for a gardener. When I first got these packages, it's just like, this is what it smells like and this is what it does to you. I mean, nothing about how far apart to plant seeds, what they need. So again, the book has this type of information from talking to these experts and growing myself for several years. And then you can also start from clones. So these are vegetative cuttings, and this is, the way to bypass the whole female male question. And I think they are particularly fragile because they have been grown under artificial light 100%, because oftentimes they're just going into somebody's indoor garden. And so you have to harden them off, acclimate them to the outside very gently and very carefully. I love seeds. They grow a taproot, they grow stronger. I think the process of sexing plants, as it's called, is fun, although it takes up some space before you can start to see their sex organs. The reason I said this is changing is that nurseries are now selling teenagers, which are grown up a little bit more than this. So you are able, and you're able to get seedlings. Finally, when I started, there were no seedlings, female seedlings, and that more and more is being offered, which is great. It just sort of speeds things up. And cannabis is, I'm going to stay here for a minute. Cannabis is for the most part, photo period sensitive. So one of the things that really scared me is, I've just always heard about these strange light ratios, 12, 12 and 18, whatever. And it's like, what? And out in the garden, you don't need to worry about switching a light switch. It just sort of happens with summer solstice. And the gist is that the plant grows and grows and grows vegetatively, sort of like a determinate tomato, until it flowers, and like a determinate tomato, flowers and fruits. In the cannabis world, it's like, I think because so many people have been in control of this garden, it's talked about so much more like a black and white switch, vegetative and flowering. And out in the garden, it's much more, it just sort of it unfolds slowly. So you'd want to get your plants out, Southern California, May, something like this. Starting seeds often lines up well with tomatoes, with the tomato, when to start tomatoes in your area. And then you'll start to see pre-flowers, which we'll talk about because that's when you can see the sex organs, and then they flower in earnest as the season goes on. There is a cousin of cannabis sativa, and that's called cannabis ruderalis, which is this pretty bad, meaning not tasty, not desirable, sort of ditch weed that it comes from like Siberia. And I'm telling you, people took weed everywhere they went. And actually, that's not so far from where it was originally found in China. Anyway, so ruderalis is not photoperiod sensitive. It grows and flowers in a very fixed amount of time, as you might imagine, in such a cold condition. And so that is being bred into more desirable cultivars. And that is what you may have heard of as autoflower. These cultivars that are not dependent on the right, getting light just right. And I have never had much interest in autoflower. I think because I just feel like a purist. I want to let the plant fully express itself. I think it's so wild, this photoperiod dependent stuff. But I'll tell you, more and more farmers are getting interested and going all in on autoflower. And the reason is, if we were in a room, I would say, any guesses? And then we'd have some interaction and it would be so nice. But I can't see you. So wildfires, right? So, to not have ash and whatever else raining on your plants for a month before you harvest is desirable. So that is one of the reasons that has made me more interested in autoflower and open to using them. I have to keep an eye on the time. Okay, I have to go. We have to keep talking. All right, so there's different ways I'm going slowly and I'm going to give it all away, and I have to leave it so that you guys get the book. There's different ways to tell the sex. You can do it the fancy, sort of also expensive way of feeling like a scientist and mashing up the cotyledon and mailing it to a lab that does the genetic testing. Or you can sex your plants with the pre-flower. These are a picture of the male and female. Any guesses? Again, it would be fun if we were in person. We could have a really good chuckle about how the males have balls. The males are here on the right and they have balls. And the females have these delicate little hairs. And there's like some classic cannabis accoutrement like bat guano and bone meal, but you know what, whatever, compost. Really, I just do compost and call it a day. And this is my picture of just showing you, in the garden, full sun, good drainage, but also it will take whatever. Cannabis is really good at picking up whatever is in the soil. It was used for bioremediation in Chernobyl. I mean, it's a really fascinating plant. And you don't need to, it'll take the water, but it doesn't need it. There are people who in the right settings are dry farming cannabis and getting amazing flavor profiles and terpene and cannabinoid profiles, right? As gardeners, we get this. We stress our plants and they make more of an effort trying to reproduce. So drip irrigation, pretty no fuss until harvest time, and then it gets fussy. So these are just some pictures. I have a whole chapter in my book that profiles various cannabis gardeners and across the country, although the only ones photographed are California because we're way ahead of the game, in different settings and growing for different reasons. There's no reason that this can't be a showstopper in your summer veggie patch or summer veggie bed. Probably tucked away front yard isn't a good idea, and you need to check on your local municipality's rules because there are rules sometimes about keeping it behind a fence, etc. This is from the home garden of a second generation grower up in up in Humboldt. And he was taught to grow by his mom. And when she moved him from the Bay Area up there, and he served 10 years in federal prison when he was busted, and it was his very first offense. So he comes by it honestly. His name is Johnny Casali, Huckleberry Hill Farms. These are two different gardens that I talk about in the book. There are sweet stories. On the left is in Marin County, a guy named Zero, who is an old rock and roll star, not star, he was like the audio engineer for people in the 60s. He's shared stages with everyone. He is super cool, and he doesn't know how to garden. His wife is Italian American, no-till, beautiful garden, so many different varieties of fruits and everything. And then you've got Zero growing his weed in these, you can see kiddie pools covered with mesh. He's scared of the roots touching the soil. So this is just amusing because there are a lot of people who know a lot about weed but don't actually know how to garden. He's doing a great job. He's growing a beautiful plant from a weed person, but because he's learned weed from a weed person, he like only knows how to grow weed and is scared of everything else in the garden. Which is why you should, my whole goal is to sort of bring weed in, welcome it into our garden world, and show cannabis people that it's not actually that mysterious to grow, that hard to grow. It's not that scary, and show all of us who maybe are big time gardeners but have never grown weed that it's another plant we can embrace with incredible smells, etc. I have all the nitty gritty in the book of, how to prune it. At very least, you want to top it so that you get more lateral growth and you don't get a Christmas tree of a giant bud that is super cool but really hard to dry out without getting mold. And I think, even as someone who doesn't use a lot of cannabis in my own life, although man, leave it to a pandemic to change that. There's something about growing something and witnessing its whole life cycle. So weed all looks mostly the same, right? In the dispensary, it's these little brown turds, browny green turds. But in your garden, you're going to see so much variety, the whole life cycle, and it's just absolutely worth it. This is towards the end of one season of growth. The plants start looking super weird and they start stacking, as you can see in this one, just piling on these sticky resinous flowers that you touch and your hands are sticky. I give a couple different ways to get that off your hands in the garden. And the smells are unbelievable. Some people will swear it smells like this blueberry muffin that I grew. It smells just like the fresh blueberries taken out of the oven. And for me, it's like, it smells like fresh blueberries taken out of the oven and weed. Everything to me still smells like weed, but with these really incredible smells. If you're into scented geraniums or, scented mints, like this is what you need in your garden to explore a whole new realm of things. There's a few different ways to tell when your cannabis is ripe. I go through, there's a third that I don't like, and I talk about all that in the book, but when half of these hairs, or even more than half, have turned amber and the rest are the color that they were when they grew, like these ones were white, that's getting very close. And then I always squeeze the nug, and if it's spongy, it can go a little bit longer, and if it's firmed up, it's time. And taking down the plant. So in the book, I also talk about this. There was this one time at Sunset Magazine, I grew quinoa. I was tasked with growing quinoa. And it was so easy. Drought tolerant, no fuss, walked away, left it alone. And then the post-processing, the threshing and winnowing was nothing I really ever want to do again. Weed isn't that bad, but it's the post-processing that sort of has the laborious part. So you want to make sure that you have an area to dry your weed set up before it's harvest day. And it's like drying any other herb that you may have dried, right? It needs to be dark, it needs to be cool, not too humid. And there's certain specifications and ways to set that up, but you want to have that set up before drying time. So this is hanging your weed up to dry. So my book, I have to say, I worked with this photographer who I'd worked with at all for my entire time at Sunset, named Rachel Weil. She's fantastic. So when I say my book is beautiful, I'm giving credit to her. And I wanted this part of my book to also be beautiful, see it through. So this is what I had dreamed of for my drawing room. I cleared out a closet from upstairs and made it beautiful. And my husband said to me, I cannot go to work one more day smelling like I just took bong rips. Get it out of here. So down to the basement it went. And this part of my book looks like everybody else's part of their book. I mean, it's just ugly, right? Because it's this dark place out of the way. It does smell for a couple of days, then it gets a little bit better. So there's different schools of thought on if you should dry trimmed, which is taking off the excess plant material, or untrimmed, leaving it on. Your goal with cannabis is a slow, steady dry. 2 weeks ideal, 10 days to 2 weeks, so that you're not just having all these volatile compounds, all these terpenes and cannabinoids evaporate. So depending on how arid or humid your climate is, you might opt for getting rid of material to speed it up, or keeping it on to slow it down. It's also just a bit of a preference. There's a whole, I'm sure you all know, there's an entire industry in Northern California consisting of people who travel up north to trim during trimming time. And I think that part of the process also really intimidated me. But when it's your own plants, 6 at most, it's not terrible. Unlike the quinoa, it does not deter me from doing this every year. Let's see. So different instructions on how to trim. You're basically trying to get off the parts of the plant that don't have those yummy, all the crystals all over it, which are the capsules, the resinous capsules that have the flavor in them. So on the left is a picture of weed that you get at a dispensary, and it is super trimmed, this little nug. And on the right is how I store my weed, and how every farmer I know who might sell their weed to look like this, they actually store their own weed, much less trimmed, keeping a lot of those leaves on for several reasons. First of all, it's a heck of a lot easier not to have to trim your entire crop in one go. Second of all, it really keeps it keeps everything pristine. So all the pistils totally pristine. And as you cut it open to, as you trim it up to use, you unveil this really perfect bud, and all your friends think that you're the coolest. You can store in glass. Do I have any other pictures? Yeah, glass stain. I really love these stainless steel locking tubs. There's a curing. So in weed, you want to dry and cure. People have very, very, very complicated ways of curing, which is just sort of this last step of getting any moisture that's left deep in the bud drawn out slowly. I just bucket, which is the term for cutting it off the stem, putting it in a storing container, and I will cover it for the night, open it in the morning. If it feels wetter, if it feels more wet than it was when I put it to bed, I'll leave the lid off for a little while, and I'll do this process of burping for a few days until it's consistent. This hygrometer, this guy, I have smaller ones now, tiny, that you get a bunch for not that much, and I keep those in the jars, and I can see how the humidity is doing. And I also throw in a Bovita pack, which are these two-way humidity packs. And the industry standard is a little wetter than I like my weed. And as I asked around, it's like, well, yeah, wetter weed sells for more money. So I wasn't crazy to think that I don't want it at 62 or 68% humidity. 58 feels just about right. And something I learned the hard way is that you have to change the Bovita packs once in a while. The book has all sorts of fun things you can do with your weed, like make tinctures, which is my favorite way to consume, or infuse oil to use either in baking or to use in products, what am I trying to say? For your skin, topical things, salve, whatever. Again, I don't make claims about what it will do for your health. That is for your chosen herbalist to do, or your chosen bud tender, or in time doctors as we study, however you get your medicine. The best argument that I've heard is that, because for me, I like science when it comes to my medicine. I don't need to this I talked about this even before the pandemic, but now it's even more. Anyway, what we do know is that stress is a precursor to most disease and can make anything worse. And that I can agree with and say out loud. And if you can find a cultivar of cannabis or a way of using it that decreases your stress, I think you're off to the races. And this is just somebody's home garden that's in my book. And she's nearby where I live. I live in Berkeley, and she's in Albany, and she's got it growing next to her citrus and salvias and dahlias and everything else right where it belongs in the garden. So I'm gonna stop there and stop sharing my screen. And oh no, just kidding, just kidding. I wanted to tell you just a few more things of what has kept me interested in cannabis in the last few years since the book has come out. It came out March 2020, which we were kind of dealing with other things at that moment in time. So first of all, just the crazy amount of diversity within the cultivars, amongst cultivars is fascinating. This is one called Freak Show that I grew not this year, but last year. And it just has this mutation of the leaf, and this is what it looks like. And it's awesome. I think it smells so bad. The description on the seed says something like eucalyptus with hints of whatever. And to me, it's like dirty mop water. I don't like it. And then the other thing that 2020 brought for me was wanting to do some course correction for my time working as somebody in publishing, in garden publishing. And that is that, at Sunset and for this book, for example, when deadlines are always of the essence, and it's like you need the prettiest garden as fast as you can, because of huge systems of systemic racism. Those are mostly white people that we find, white people's gardens. And I wanted to dig a little bit and find other stories to tell. And what started as a pet project of my own, just for wanting to find and talk to Black cannabis gardeners, led to a story being published. It was in the San Francisco Chronicle, and it's also online at, I'm gonna have to get back to you, I'm totally blanking on the name of the outlet, of 4 different cannabis gardeners. I kept it to garden scale, and their really complicated relationship with the plant, as they are from a group of people that were specifically marginalized and targeted with this plant for criminal purposes. And learning their stories, telling their stories was a really wonderful experience for me. And there are gardens that I might not have chosen to be the prettiest right away, but I think when you get a camera, without totally dissecting what our standards of beauty are, I think getting a photographer to shuffle plants around, and there's so much beauty if you can just take a little bit more time. And that has really stayed with me, and I hope to do more and more stories reflecting our actual diversity and how we relate to plants in my time still writing. This is my friend Jamal. I am going to stop my share, and I hope you will have questions. Oh, the chat. So I can probably go through them. I'm capable, or I can let you do it and just zone out. No, I can do it. Is that okay with you? Okay.
Yeah, we just have a couple.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not sure if the Q&A function is working or not. So if anybody wants to ask Johanna a question, try doing it in the chat section, and we will repeat it.
Oh, I see one. Do you know if anyone has bred plants with variegated or dark foliage? Not a silly question. So as a gardener, I like do not care about the high. I'm so done with that. I'm in it for different size plants, different color leaves, variegation, etc. No, to my knowledge, no. And what I've been told by some Janet Sluice, I don't know if you all know her. She's a horticulturalist up here. She was responsible for the Sunset plant line, and she's just an incredible horticulturist. She says that a lot of the breeders are tinkering with it on the side, but until there's federal legalization and people can actually make money in plant patents, that's not really going to be their main focus, which makes sense. Does citrus inhibit cannabis flowering? I've not heard that. I've not heard anything about citrus and cannabis. You know, if in those, so I mentioned the wildfires and ash raining, and ash isn't actually the worst thing to have on a plant. It can prevent mold, etc. It was all the toxins that were so gross. And my friend Jamal, who was pictured in that, said that what he was worried about more than anything, this is a year ago when at least up here we had that day that the sun didn't rise. He was worried about a lack of any sunlight for that day for weed, because it is photo period dependent. And if it changes its mind, right? Like if you stress it out and it starts flowering, it's not like anything that you can just snip and then it keeps growing. It's mad. And so he was really concerned that the plants would fail without a day of any UV light. And indeed they were fine.
I actually have a couple of Q&As coming in now too. So
great. Oh, right.
I don't know, can you see those?
Yes. Can you start seeds any time of the month in Southern California? So I think you mean any time of the year. And again, you want to look into the cultivar you're selecting and make sure that, so there's this whole thing that if it's auto flower, apparently you can start at any time of the year. I've been asked to trial some auto flowers that were started in November, December. They didn't do well. So I think if you want to have success, I would still time it as though it is a warm season annual with a big buffer. So I don't know when y'all start your tomato seeds. I'm thinking late spring. Around that time of year will be the best, because they do need time to grow vegetatively, unless they're autoflower, before the summer solstice. How long do you generally let your plants grow for? So again, I let them grow until they're ripe. And people get super freaked out about rain, but it's really, it's really no reason to freak out. First of all, a lot of people I know with the fires, especially last year when it was just awful up here, air quality wise, they did something called a bud wash, which is they dunked their plants. There's different recipes for it online, in like a hydrogen peroxide water mix, which is so counterintuitive to me, because what people get scared of after harvest is mold. So it was so counterintuitive that you'd be wetting your plants. And every farmer I spoke to was like, no way, never do this. No way. It's too labor intensive. But every home gardener who did it loved it and said it was worth it. All this disgusting stuff came out of the water. So just to say that, like, rain doesn't matter, et cetera. And you start tomato seeds. I should have known that, Yvonne, in January and February. So like, it's not, unless it's going to get, nowhere gets a super cold. You don't need to worry about cold down there either. So, until the plant is ripe, and there's no one right moment, the cannabinoids just start to change as it ripens. So yes, January, February, I've done it then. I've also started my seeds in April and been a little bit later and been just fine. So there really is a big buffer. If you can get any information about the cultivar you're growing, if it is more historically sativa, if it is supposed to go longer, then you might start it earlier. And if it is a shorter season one, you can get away doing it later. Do I make use of the trim? Absolutely. So as I showed you, that bud that shows up in the dispensary is missing a lot of really usable leaf with trichomes. That's the word I couldn't find earlier, all over it. And you can absolutely use the trim, infuse it in any way that you would anything else. And I should say, for weed to be psychoactive, for THC to be psychoactive, it has to be heated up. It's called decarboxylated, decarbed. And so if you have kids or anything like that, they're not going to get, I have a 4-year-old, they're not going to get high from being in the garden rolling around your plants, or even doing so. I mean, I wouldn't keep your drugs near your kids anyway, but nothing bad is going to happen unless you have heated it up first. Did you have to deal with any specific garden pests like those little hungry caterpillars? Yes. Yes, cat, I did. So the main culprit, the main pest around here where you are everywhere are that butterflies lay their eggs in the flowers, and the butterflies lay their eggs, the caterpillars hatch, they poop, the poop rots, you get something called botrytis or bud rot. So this is the same question that Rose has below. It's the same, you don't want anybody laying their eggs inside the buds. So there's a couple different ways to handle this. As I said, I'm very tough love, and the real way to do it is spraying BT once a week on your plants when they start flowering. And I did it like once, and I was like, oh, do they know? Do these butterflies know who I am? Like, they'll be fine, just one, and it totally didn't work. This was last year, and I lost so much of my crop. And I was like, I'm using BT next year. I'm done with this. But I have to tell you, you can't take the organic out of me. I just don't care. I would rather leave the butterflies and lose my crop. And I think and lose a lot, share it. That's just how I am. We have too many monarchs around here. So yes, you can either deal with them or not, but BT would be the way. Somebody asked if now I'm switching over to the other section.
Actually, before we, we do
you
have a
have
bunch
your
of questions,
Yeah.
but it is closing in on 8:30, and I welcome, as long as you have time to answer some questions, we'll continue
Totally.
With it, because I think it's really a fascinating subject, and we're getting more questions in on the chat side. But I just wanted to make a couple of announcements and thank you for being here before I forget, and thank Bridget Lee for her her presentation as well. And we'll be doing the door prize in a minute, which we will have a wheel of names of everybody who registered for this webinar, and I will spin it, and hopefully somebody will win your book. And I also wanted to announce that our next month's webinar is also going to be really interesting. It's going to be Maddie Williams, who is a landscaper and urban planner, and it is going to be on a brief history of African American landscape architects. I think he is with the Black Landscape Architects Association, and he'll be speaking about that. I think there's some projects in the LA area that he'll be able to speak on. I want to thank everybody for joining us if you have to leave, and to remind you that we will be, this whole webinar has been recorded, and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel within a week. So if you missed anything, if you came in late, you'll be able to view this again and again and get your tips on growing weed. So let me just go back to, we're going to do a quick break to spin the, I'm going to share my screen, and we'll spin the wheel of names here and see who we come up with to win a prize. Hold on one second. All right. So if you all can hear me, this is our wheel of names for today, and I do a quick spin. And this is a door prize to win a copy of Johanna's recent book. If you are here and you can raise your hand, that would be Phyllis S. Phyllis, are you here? Do we have, we're going to try this 3 times if we don't get an answer. I need to see a raised hand from Phyllis. Phyllis S. Maybe not. Okay, let's try one more time. How about Natalia? Natalia I, are you here? Need to see you raise your hand. Natalia I. Unfortunately, we always have a few more people sign up than are actually present. All right, we're going to try this one more time. Oh, that was almost me. How about Ariana C? Are you here, Ariana? No? Well, we will, somebody will be able to get a book. We'll figure out how to do that later, but we're going to go back to our question and answer session for now. And we will go back to Joanna here. Okay.
Hi.
And so we have quite a few.
Yeah.
We have quite a few.
So I got it. Okay.
Okay.
Do you recommend using neem oil in the evening? I mean, if that's your way of keeping the caterpillars away and that works for you, do it, fine. Again, I've just chosen to make peace with the loss. And then there was one I wanted. Patenting with respect to weed. Well, I sort of address, I mean, it's just that in ornamental, mostly ornamental horticulture, the motivation to breed deals with, it comes from making money off of a patented plant, and just that people won't be motivated to do that until they can earn a buck, and that won't happen until legalization. Deer eat them too. So weed gets put on these lists because it's super smelly, of plants that deer won't eat. But the way I've had several farmers explain it to me is like every other plant. If a deer is hungry, it will eat your weed. So, I wouldn't risk it with that. Can you cover your plants with netting? Why? Is that to keep the caterpillars away? I'm much too lazy. So I am a total lazy, tough love gardener. I'm sorry if I'm now answering your questions by just saying I don't do that. Does your book cover growing in the high desert? So my book, it does not specifically have regions, considerations to take, but you'll want to get a quicker growing, a shorter season plant. And I've not had anyone, I have a grower in Arizona, though I don't think in the high desert. And then my dad has grown in Santa Fe. And there's been no problems with sun or anything like that. So it is a really, really adaptable plant. Possible to extend the growing season, germination indoor and then harden off gradually. Yeah, totally. Do that. Start them inside. And I do that. I start them outside in Berkeley just because it does fine. Every time I start seedlings indoors, they just get leggy. And I don't have a proper setup with the light and the mat and that type of thing. Although I'm sure many of you do. Is that all of them? Did I miss anything? Don't be shy.
We had a couple comments from somebody who grows here in Burbank. And she said that she starts her seed in March to set out in April or May.
Perfect.
That's for Southern California.
What do you do if the neighbors complain about the smell? I only had one neighbor say something snarky to me, and I don't know. I think I just told him that I worked at Sunset for 10 years and to leave me alone. Not really, but he was just being snarky about that prized agricultural commodity in my backyard. I mean, I think they'd be happy if you just gift them a little bit at the end of the season. This was a few years ago too. I think I think the times are changing, my friends. I really do. You know, I spoke at several Jewish book fairs last year, pitching myself as, you know, the nice Jewish girl who's ready to hold your hand as you look at weeds, since everybody's actually curious. And I commented to both groups in sort of the green room before that I was proud of them for taking a chance on me and that it's a little risque. And they were like, and they just all kind of started talking about all the products they use, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the times are really changing with our openness to weed. Do you know what they grow as commercial hemp? So again, that question is really, it's so vague because hemp just means anything without a lot of THC. And so it could mean really really quality, you know, there's a farm in Oregon that you can look up called East Fork Cultivars. You know, there are these incredible farms that are really breeding hemp, and what they mean by hemp is high quality CBD, other cannabinoids that we're just sort of coming into being interested about, and resinous flowers, amazing labor practices, and, you know, organic growing methods. And then commercial hemp can also mean, you know, crap from China with no labor or environmental policies that's, you know, extracted CBD that's not quality. So it can just mean a lot of different things. So that's why it's good to get savvy to some of the lingo around this. And then the benefits to keeping the male plant is, yeah, totally. So there are a lot of people. So first of all, the pollen doesn't open like all of a sudden and you've got seeds everywhere. You've got a long time of growing this plant. So a lot of people swear by the health benefits of, you know, juicing the leaves, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, I'm not gonna like tell you what, I'm not an expert in the endocannabinoid system and how to best, you know, optimize yours. But if you like juicing green leaves, go for it. I used a lot of the cuttings in floral arrangements that season. It's a beautiful component to add. And then if you do want to do any of your own backyard breeding, which I'm going to tell you is not going to go super well just because of the mess of genetics. So if you just want to have fun with it, you can absolutely keep a male. It needs to be really far away from your female. Like I would cut a stem of it and put it in water and put it in your house inside and keep the windows shut, and then just selectively pollinate, because you will pollinate the entire neighborhood. What did you make of UC Riverside certificate program? I don't know. I didn't do it. Hi there, I'm Ted. I asked about high desert. I live in Antelope Valley. Freezing at night. Any advice? Freezing at night in the summer? If you can grow a tomato, you can grow cannabis, period. So you just want to grow something during your window of a growing season, starting seeds, then for you, it would be exactly like what you do with tomatoes, or try your hand at autoflower, which is by definition a shorter growing season. If you were, oh, that was just to me about, yeah. Okay, do you save the seed at the end of the season? So again, my goal is no seed. My goal is Sensimilla, seedless weed. And I have saved the seed when I had a blueberry muffin, male and female. I saved the seed, and they didn't germinate. But I'm not, I mean, I just always blame the weather when things don't germinate. So you can save the seed, but I just wouldn't be banking on it being what it was, because these seed lines are just not super stable. I think that was it.
I think you've covered it. That was, I have a ton more questions, but we don't want to keep you here all night. And that was really, really interesting talk. And now I'm going to have to buy your book for myself.
There you go. I thought you were going to say, now I have to grow some weed, which is like all I want people to feel is not scared. But if your takeaway is that you want to buy my book, I think that's even better. Just to tell you, the book goes through the book. Each chapter has an anecdote about my personal experience or family history or something funny, I promise. And then it gets into the nitty gritty of how to do said thing. So I hope you will find it useful. It's also beautiful and just not intimidating.
Exactly. And I think, I've been intimidated by, you have to have a room dedicated in your house with the grow lights. So it's really, really excited to take a look at this from another perspective as a gardener. So thank you again for a really interesting presentation. Just want to remind everybody again, we will be posting this as on our YouTube channel within a week, and really appreciate all of you for joining us. And just to let you know, you're getting a lot of thank yous and great presentations. So thank you again, Johanna. It was really nice, and hopefully we will see you again soon out in the world.
I
Thank you
hope
very
so.
much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.